Thank you very much, Ana Maria, for your invitation to this lecture. So I would speak here about a research topic that about which I have published several years ago. It is part of one of my research axes, so to say, on silverware, on prestige silverware, silver plates, which were used, we'll see immediately, already by Hellenistic kings, and then by early Roman emperors, and finally also by Byzantine king Basileus, by Heraclius, in parallel with the Sasanian king of kings, in order to express their power. I'm not speaking here of propaganda, because like Paul Venn did it, not everything a king is doing in order to express his power is propaganda. Propaganda is a word which, in the narrowest sense, involves the wish to convince someone that you are the stronger. You need to make publicity in order to make propaganda. Or these kings did not need publicity, they are simply expressing their power or their own vision about themselves. So this is what is happening with this kind of silver plates, and I'm showing here the silver plates which interested me, and which we'll discuss here in order to understand better the way Heraclius communicated about his power and his achievements. This is a silver plate which is in the Hermitage Museum. And it was made at the beginning of the 7th century. We'll see immediately it had stamps on the back, and because it attests that it's coming from an imperial workshop. You can see up here it has a hole, so this plate was not made in order to eat in it, but to be exposed, like we have decorations in houses with all kinds of plates. Yeah, the question is, when the model appeared, then we can go back to a late classical, possibly Hellenistic model of the scene and even of the plate. What I want to tell you is how this plate was made, why it was made, and why Heraclius, a Byzantine king, would have used such, mythological figures in order to express his power. First, about the plate, so you see how the composition is made. This is a triple structure. This is something normal for this kind of silverware. First up, there is a tree and general landscape. We are in some edges of the world, of the city. And in the middle, we have the main characters between two secondary characters, a servant and another peasant, which brings something to the main hero. We'll identify it immediately with Meleager, and to his companion, the brave virgin hunter Atalanta. And then down the lower part of the plate, we have some hunting dogs and a net. So this allows the viewers to see immediately that this is about hunting. Now we recognize Meleager with a spear, young, beautiful, and naked, frontally in a pose which goes back, to Scopas, to a model of the classical time. We have descriptions in Pausanias, and we have many Roman copies of the lost Greek classical statue. And Atalanta also usually appears with a dress, or here it is quite savage what he has. You see with one breast left outside, just like an Amazon, because she is an unusual virgin. She does not look for marriage, but she does things that only normal men are doing in Greek times, and even more in mythical times. We have a lot of representations of Meleager and Atalanta, and I will try in this lecture to explain why this is the case. The reason is Paideia and Homer, and of course we have representations. You can see here in Pompeii, so people were painting this on their houses, were showing Meleager as a model of useful in the education of young men. And we will see immediately how this tragic hero can be used as a model, as a symbol of Greek paideia. And in the same time, it can be used in a cathartic way. So it is one side a model you have to do as Meleager, but in another time, after one certain point, you don't have to do like Meleager. So the story of Meleager has a cathartic role. It takes out of you the envy to do something which could cause a tragedy. We have representations, I was telling you, going back to late classical time to 4th century BC. For example, here an Etruscan mirror, and you see how similar it is with the Pompeian painting. So the myth was told and reproduced by analogous figures for more than 1,000 years, at least 1,500 years possibly, so from classical times until these early Byzantine times. And you have here also some images from late antique mosaics or from woolen wall hangings. All the time Meleager and Atalanta are together in the life of the ancient people. Now the question is, why they made this kind of plates? Was it a plate in order to be put in a sanctuary? Was it a plate to be used for political communication, as I was saying? And I will argue in favor of the political communication, of political use of the classical myth in this specific frame of the Greek classical paideia. Because we have examples of this political use of this kind of plates in earlier times. And I had published before a plate which, in my opinion, goes back to the 1st century BC. It is called the Aulis plate. It is in a collection, in a private collection. We do not know exactly where it was found. Most probably it comes from Afghanistan, because it has also some inscriptions in Pelevi or on the back. But the plate was certainly done in Italy, in my opinion, by the middle of the 1st century BC, because what we are seeing on this plate, it's another representation, this time from the Homeric cycle. It is a scene which takes place in front of the Aulis temple of Artemis, and we see here the two Atrids, Agamemnon, who is the big king, the old king seated, Menelaus, who wants to conduct the expedition to Troy, some soldiers, and Achilles, who was quite upset against Agamemnon because he was used as a pretext for the coming of Iphigenia in Aulis. Iphigenia was told, and Clytemnestra were told that Achilles will marry Iphigenia, but in fact Agamemnon wanted to sacrifice Iphigenia in order to make the expedition to Troy. So this motif, we find it in different representations, among which other representations of the 1st century BC, like the famous Tabula Iliaca, where you can see here the beginning of the Iliad. So with inscriptions and representations, people were studying Homer, they were learning by heart, and they had pleasure in admiring sculptures, pictures, or even this kind of plates around them. And we have also vases in reliefs from Hellenistic times with the same scenes, this time not directly from Homer, but from the tragic poets who reinterpreted Homer. And what I have suggested for this 1st century BC plate is that it is a kind of political communication of the two Luculi. Lucius Lucullus and Marcus Lucullus were two brothers who were active in the beginning of the 1st century BC in the wars against Mithridate Eupator. And yeah, we can say that Lucius Lucullus, the older brother, was a kind of Agamemnon, and Marcus Lucullus was a kind of Menelaus. One of the brothers were active in Anatolia, the other ones conquered our Dobroja, so to say, so the western part of the Black Sea, and was active between Bulgaria and Romania today. And both of them, when they returned to Rome, they made a wonderful triumph, and they had a poet, Archias, about whom we know from Cicero, who wrote a poem to their honor, comparing them with the Atrides, with Agamemnon and Menelaus. And we know about this comparison from Cicero, we know from Plutarch, it is quite well attested, and we also know that the Luculi, and in particular Lucius Lucullus, thought himself as some kind of big king. So he was sometimes compared, he was sometimes called Xerxes Togatus, according to Plutarch, and he had fisheries at the Bay of Naples, and he thought of himself like a king of the world, like a defeater of Mithridates. Of course, in Rome, he could not be himself a king, but he thought that, yeah, the defeater of Mithridates should be a king of kings, something very big. And in fact, when he retired from the public life, he had a wealthy and lavish lifestyle, so worthy of a king of kings. He was making projects and dreams about defeating all the kings of the East, yeah, he thought of himself. So through this title of King of Kings, which was taken at that time by the Armenian king Tigranes, as Agamemnon, because Agamemnon also is said king to be king of kings in the mythic literature, of course. So we have all this kind of political communication in a context of the late Republic, when, of course, these Luculi could not pretend too much on the public scene. There is already the play between Caesar and Pompey starting strongly at that time, but yeah, they still make this kind of objects in order to show that they pretend to be, at least symbolically, the masters of the world, just like the Atrides in the Homeric myth. We have other people who, by comparison with the big king of kings, with the Persians, Achaemenids, and of course thinking about a war against the Parthians, the Persians of their time, represented themselves, recalling the Homeric models. And yeah, we have these things of Caligula, who, yeah, he imitated the Xerxes, or we have things about Nero. We'll talk about him immediately, because Nero had an obsession with Achilles. So always a transposition in myth in order to pretend to be the greatest on the world. Now, this fashion, this political, fashion of the political communication was not invented by the Romans in the 1st century BC, but it probably comes from Hellenistic times, and we have proofs for that in Alexandria. The proof, there are two elements. One, Tassa Farnese, which is in Napoli. You can see here a very nice cameo, represents the richness of Egypt with the Nile, and the in particular, the wealthy of the Nile flooding. And here you have an silver plate from Antiochia, which is variously dated between the 1st century BC and 1st century AD again, and where it is debated who is represented here as a civilizer hero who in a Nilotic landscape. So it can be either Marcus Antonius, or either someone until Caligula, and so on. In any case, there is always, you see his head, it's a Roman. It is a political communication of the Romans, who take out a mythical figure. In this case, it is the Erichtonius, the hero who brought civilization by bringing agriculture, and who represents himself, like a kind of Ptolemaic king in the middle of the richness of Egypt. So why on this silver plate I was mentioning, we have also Achilles. This could be Cato Minor, we don't know, but in any case, what I want you to retain is that all these people from Hellenistic and early Roman times, they were recognizing themselves with mythical characters, and they were projecting themselves on this kind of objects which serve the political communications. And what is all about here, it's a model, Achille as a model of fortitudo, of strength, and of virtue. You have to master your passions, your wrath, in the case of Achille, in order things to go well. And on other kind of vessels, Augustus is showing how he masters his feelings, his emotions, and behaves properly with hostages who themselves are associated with mythical, so are represented in a way. The mythical hostages are here represented. So we have here some defeated, probably Germans, who are represented just like Priam was coming to beg Achilles in the past. So this is Augustan. We have also in other frames, in other contexts, not only of war, representations of, let's say, emperors or political persons who try to attach themselves, to take over the image of a mythical hero. And this is a very nice silver cup from Xanten, which represents Jason and Creusa. And it was probably distributed as a present, as a political present to Germanic tribes at the marriage of Tiberius with Agrippina. Now we all know that Jason and Creusa did not have a happy marriage, but yeah, we have always to think that it is the paideia, the imitation provocation. You have to be as good as a hero you pretend to be, to identify with, and then the bad part of the myth, the tragic part of the myth, it's catharsis. It happened badly for the hero. You have to learn from his example, and it will be better for you. Now, learning from Achille, we come to the Byzantine times. It's something that also in late antiquity it happened, and we have this kind of plate which is called the Shield of Scipio. It is in Paris in the National Library. I address you an invitation to come and see the new museum, wonderful museum, very new, of the French National Library, where you can admire all kinds of treasures which belonged on some place to the French kings. And what you can see here, it's the beginning of Achilles' wrath, because Briseis was taken from Achille, although she belonged to him after he won her in battle. And yeah, we have the several scenes in the same time. It's usually the case with this kind of representations, because people were knowing the poems by heart, and this serves just like a memento. So it is the discussions you can see here, the embassy from the Song 9 of the Iliad, the embassy for trying to reconcile Achilles, because the war was going very bad for the Achaeans. So all this serves as a model for an elite person, for a power man, in order to remember him, be calm with your people. And you see that this kind of plates has exactly the same shape, dimensions, width as some other plates which simply show the emperor. We call them missoria, and this is a missorium of Theodosius I, where you can see him with Valentinian II and with Arcadius in a throning scene. So this is just simply the political official image of the king. What you can have with other plates, like the one with Achilles, and here the shield of Hannibal, you see a lion, or this kind of plate where it is more explicit related with Heracles. You can have also this political communication of the elites, of the emperor himself, by the mythic example, by the mythical hero which inspired him. And it's interesting, this is a 6th century AD plate, so we can imagine that it was made as a elite present. Once again, one does not eat in this plate. It can be a diplomatic gift, it can be a payment or a military decoration. In any case, it is something symbolic, someone who associates himself in this case with Heracles, with the hero who conquered all the world, who brought civilization by killing all the monsters and so on, offered this plate. Now coming back to our first plate, the Meleager and Atalanta, and to Heraclius, I hope you agree a little bit and you understand a little bit better why on an imperial plate we can have such a myth, why the emperor would be interested in communicating with a silver object, which is again normally used for diplomatic gifts, for paying the army, or for communicating something to other elites. Well, on this plate, we can be sure that it is the emperor who did it and the emperor who communicated, because we have these stamps. So there is absolutely no doubt that the plate was made in the imperial workshop, and the stamps assure us that it was made between 613 and 629 AD. So Heraclius communicating about most probably himself as Meleager. It is not the only late antique plate with Meleager. So the emperor Basileus just took over a motif which was rather common in late antique times and which was already common since Greek classical times. We will see immediately. But here you have another example from a German private collection, which was published here by Erika Simon as a comparison to the woolen textile I was showing you. So this plate, you can see just a Meleager standing alone after he has defeated the boar. So the image was common, and it is not a mystery. Meleager is mentioned in the Iliad. He is a model for young people in the education, so this is absolutely normal to have him. Now, why Heraclius would have used this model? What is the relationship between the Byzantine Basileus and the Homeric hero? So Heraclius, as you know, was born about 575, and there were claims that he was of Arsacid descent. It is an important element, I will show you immediately, because of course, being related with the enemies, with the most terrible enemy, yeah, here they had a lot at the time, at the beginning of the 7th century, but in this case it was quite serious, the Sasanians. An Arsacid descent, yeah, it brings something of Iranian origin, and we can see how this can be interpreted in the myth of Meleager immediately. So you know that Heraclius became an emperor in 610, and that he had a marriage with his niece Martina, which was quite problematic. And this is one of the elements which probably, in my opinion, made closer the connection between Meleager, so the mythical example, and Heraclius. And you know that Heraclius died in 641. Now, you also know that Heraclius indeed has been the first Basileus, and really a great one, because he had quite significant victories against the Sasanians, and especially for the Christians. And here I'm coming to the connection with David, the King David. He was a champion of Christianity because he recovered the Holy Cross, you know, the cross which was supposed to be a Christ cross, found by Helena, the mother of Constantine the Great, in Jerusalem. This cross was taken by the Sasanians in 60, and when we'll see immediately the general of Khosroes II took Jerusalem. And Heraclius took over Jerusalem and recovered then the Holy Cross in 630. And then, of course, he started the fight against the Muslims. So Heraclius is important in Christianity, and this brings me to the second connection I would like to make, and this is with the King David, you know, the founder, so to say, one of the founders of Judaism, and then taken over by the Christians, because from the reign of Heracles we have also a series of 9 silver plates in which we can see, just like on images in churches, in late antique churches or mosaics, we can see the acts, the great you know, the most important moments from the life of the king, biblical king David. You can see here one of these plates which are found in Nicosia, so in Cyprus, and which are now in the New York Museum. And you see here even the most important, Goliath, a real soldier, is fronting David, who is a simple, you know, adolescent hero, very beautiful. He is dressed unlike the pagan hero, so to say, but he only has his stone with which he will kill the big Goliath. There are other plates, so you can see here a Goliath, a David who fights the lion, copying, in fact, taking over the images of Heracles you saw earlier on the same silver plates, but here it is David. He is dressed over like a soldier, and he has, you know, an aura. But just like Heracles, he has only a simple tool, so he is a killer of monsters. So what we can say with this is that already in Christian times, there has been an interpretation or the creation of an iconography for biblical heroes like David, which were copied, which were reproducing the iconography of the pagan heroes like Heracles. And this iconography of both the pagans and the Christian heroes is taken over for political communication by the emperor. And you can see here another scene. One can see all these plates. They are very beautiful, but I just took some of them. So you can see here David, who is presented to the king Saul in the same series. Some plates are bigger, others are small. They were making all together a service table, so probably an imperial service table, and they could have been offered to elites, either from the church, either political elites, you know, by the emperor, who once again, after he took over the Holy Cross, he could see himself like a founder, a refounder of Christianity, with the same significance like David had for the kingdom of Israel. And it is possible that Heraclius, or in any case, people who wanted to be pleasant to Heraclius, saw himself not only as a mythical King David, but also like Joshua. And we have here on the Joshua roll, you know, the representation of Joshua in the position of a Roman emperor. And since the model of this role could go back to the 7th century, the model is lost. We have a later copy from the Macedonian times. So the model could have been done in order to represent Heraclius like a new Joshua. Now we go back to Heraclius like Meleager. And yeah, what I want to propose as reasons for which Heraclius took over this, took the model of Meleager in order to communicate his political powers. I would not say necessary for pagans, but this is possible, but also for Christians. You know that in late antiquity there was not such a, and early Byzantine times there was not such a problem to use mythographical images, even in Christian context. And the Nonos of Panopolis is even an example of someone who, if it is the same person, could have wrote, you know, about John, or an Evangelium of John in verses, and in the same time the biggest epic poem, Dionysiaca, about Dionysos. So both are possible, either in a literary but also in an artistic way. So we don't know for whom the plate was made, but the reasons for which I think that the plate was a political communication is are as follows. So Heraclius has an Iranian and a Greek background, we say it at the beginning. He could present himself like a hunting hero. Now we have to remember what hunt is. It is a training, you know, like a military training for the Persians, but also for the Macedonians and for anybody who wanted to imitate Alexander the Great. It was not in big fashion let's say, sometimes in Greek times, Greek classical times for the Greeks themselves, for the Athenians, or in under the early Roman Empire, but maybe also under the influence of the Sasanians, for whom the hunting was very important, like a form of showing the power. And also by recovering the Macedonian Hellenistic heritage, it came back into fashion in the later Roman Empire, and we see here until the beginning of the Byzantine times. So Meleager is in the mythology the hunting hero par excellence. He's the hunter of Calydon, the one who killed. There are various myths. He killed himself, or he played an important part in killing the boar sent by Artemis as a punishment for the hubris of his father, Oeneus. Then, if an emperor, Basileus, wanted to show that he is young and strong, he could represent it himself like a hunter, like the best of the hunters in the mythology, Meleager. Then there are more personal reasons for which Heraclius could have taken this Meleager example. And the best reason is his connection with Martina, his nephew, which was very criticized. So it was not accepted to him to marry his nephew in 612, sorry. And of course, what better hero to take for a love which was totally blocked from the family from outside than Meleager and Atalanta. You know that Atalanta, since she was a hunter herself, so a kind of feminist before feminism, was not well seen by anybody, not even by the companions of Meleager during the hunt of Calydon. And then she was not well seen by the relatives of Meleager, who opposed the marriage. But Meleager killed his family and still married Atalanta and still gave her the trophy, the hunting trophy. So he put his wife, his beloved wives, before his families and his older relatives, his uncles. And this was the reason for which he died, because his own mother thrown into the fire, the charcoal, which was a symbol of Meleager's life and could have kept him alive forever. So Meleager, the young Meleager, brave and good hero, sacrificed himself for love without knowing that he sacrificed himself, and he was punished for that by his own mother. So all this can be a mythical transposition reflections of the tension situation in Heraclius' entourage when he married Martina. And then we have, of course, the idea that Meleager, by killing the boar, saved the empire, and just like Meleager defeated the Kurets and saved his homeland. So both are young and brilliant hero saviors. There is, however, another element for which I think that this play with Meleager and Atalanta was particularly welcome in the context of Heraclius' reign. And this is the fact that the boar was important for the Iranians. And since Heraclius had these connections with the Arsacids or with Armenia, he was probably aware of this. He was certainly aware of this. So the most important enemy for Heraclius, his direct enemy, was not Khosroes II, but the general who was himself Shah of the whole empire for 2 months, Shahbaraz, or Shahvaraz, in Greek, Sarbaros. And this name means the boar of the empire. Why would be someone called the boar of the empire? Because the boar for the Sasanians and more generally for the Iranians is a sacred animal. It is one of the representation, one of the shapes of the god Vahram, who is none else than the god of the war. So the boar of the empire, it's a kind, in the Iranian name of this chief, is a kind of representation of a kind of reincarnations, if you want to say, a kind of taking over the power and the shape as a boar of the god of the war himself. This is interesting because Shahbaraz made important conquests in Syria and Palestine, in Egypt between 611 and 616. And he was nearly close to take Constantinople when it was defeated by Heraclius in 625-26. Finally, he was helped by Heraclius, but yeah, it's another story. But in the moment when Shahbaraz was close to take Constantinople and Heraclius went to war against this man who had the name of, who gave himself the name, the title of boar of the empire, what best hero of the Greek culture could Heraclius compare himself to, if not the killer of the boar himself, Meleager? This is why I think that this plate can be dated by the beginning, between 622, when Heraclius first defeated Shahbaraz and put him outside, his troops outside of Anatolia, and even most probably the beginning of 624, when he started his campaign against Persia. In fact, we know by Theophanes Confessor that at the beginning of 624, Heraclius needed money, so he took over metal goods of rich particulars and big churches, and he made money in order to pay the troops and also maybe to decorate some people in order to express his power and, yeah, to take people with him, to have a good army and to make faithful the people around him, Byzantines or even foreigners. So it is a good moment at the beginning of this campaign against Shahbaraz, the boar of the empire, to represent himself as Meleager, the boar, as the killer of the boar, of the most terrible boar from the Greek mythology. And of course, there is also the dimension, I told you, there is the dimension of paideia. You follow an example, you have to behave well, like someone in mythology, like Achilles, like Heracles, or like Meleager. But there is also a tragic dimension in these representations, always a cathartic dimension. So the bad thing happened to that mythical hero, it will not happen to you. And the cathartic dimension of Meleager is the metamorphosis of the Meleagrides, so Meleagrids, this kind of birds, which since Bacchylides, so we are in Greek archaic times, are said to be the birds remembering the spirit of Meleager, who died tragically, as I told you, because he killed his uncles, and his mother, his own mother, decided to punish him by throwing the charcoal in the fire. There are, in fact, several traditions about Meleager's death. The first one, the one I told you, it's from Homer, that the Erinyes heard the curses of Altae and killed him because the mother was against him. Then we have a Hesiodic version, and it's simply that Meleager was killed in the battle against Curetes. And then there is another more general tradition with this charcoal thing from the mother, which goes back to Phrynikos. In any case, you see in 2 out of 3 traditions, the death of Meleager is related with his mother. So in any case, related to someone who mastered the vulnerability of Meleager, so which made silver plate particularly welcome for people who could have hurt Heraclius when he was in his campaign against Persia. And yeah, I'm just giving some more elements about Eros and Thanatos, Meleager as a tragic hero, as a cathartic hero. So in the moment when he honors his love for Atalanta, he is killed because as punishment, because he killed the persons who were against his love. So we see the representation of Meleager in heroic context, in funerary banquets, and then the death of Meleager. If we follow the Homeric and also the more popular version, he died of an unknown sickness with this story, with the charcoal, or yeah, in any case, it is a tragic death of a very young person at the highest of his achievements. It is the Meleager and Atalanta are together in a myth which can have also erotical connotations, and these were already explored in Hellenistic times, and they were, we know from Suetonius that they were represented together during sex in Tiberius, the second Roman emperor bedroom. So you can see the myth and their representation in different aspects. What I wanted to emphasize here is that Meleager is a heroic symbol for a young emperor who wants to imitate, but also use his image in a cathartic way. This is also the case of Achilles, and it is interesting that we see how paideia, Greek paideia works, because already in the Iliad, Meleager is a story told to Achilles. So Meleager serves already as an example for Achilles, who after that will serve as example, as you know, for many chiefs, Alexander the Great, all the Roman emperors who imitated Alexander. So these are 2 main heroes of the Greek masculine paideia to be imitated and also to be taken as, you know, precaution, as examples, you know, on the opposite for some facts. And of course, Achilles has a long history to be used as a symbol in Rome. We have Nero, we have many emperors who, as I said, imitated Alexander the Great and took Achilles as a symbol. We sometimes see them in exactly the same postures, you know, Meleager and Achilles, because they communicate. I told you they communicate in Homer. They communicate also in arts. So I think they were used also in similar ways by this political communication on silverware. So what I wanted to show you here is that, yeah, we have a consequence of the Greek classical paideia in this kind of political communication at the beginning of the Byzantine Empire. So we have Meleager and we have David, a pagan and a Christian hero, which are used by Heraclius. Why? Because he wanted to communicate with people from his entourage or with other political elites to tell them some things. I am as powerful and as civilizator as the Greek hero, or just like David, the young king of the Old Testament. Yes, you can heard me, but yeah, the myth remains, and I can be a symbol of this type. I can be this kind of charismatic leader. So I will stop here. And I would like to ask for your questions.
Thank you so much, Anca, for this fascinating lecture. Do you have questions, comments? Okay, so I wanted to ask you if there are some connections with Epiphania, her mother also, his mother.
I did not think about that. There can be, I did not think about it. Maybe you can suggest as Byzantines.
Because the mother of that hero killed him, no?
Yes, according to this Phrynikos version.
Yes, yes.
But it is not in Homer, so this kind of political examples works usually through text. And the case of Meleager is that it is mentioned in the Iliad as example for Achilles. So this is I would go for interpretation as long as this is mentioned in a text which was known by heart because it was used in schools at that time. So I'm pretty sure Heraclius knew by heart many passages from the Iliad. And of course, thinking of Alexander when he was in the East, would think of Achilles and then through Achilles to Meleager.
Yes, of course. We know for whom it was that plate made?
We do not know for whom. We only have the stamps on the back. Yeah, I would guess, but this is simply guess, it was for someone important, you know, either related to the army, either related to the church, either in any case, these are usually diplomatic gifts given to people who matter in military contexts. Yeah, it can be also barbarian chief. One can imagine many things, and of course these objects have a long life after because they travel as a silver value. You know, the artistic value, which according to Pliny the Elder can be for this Roman silverware even bigger, even greater than the silver they contain. In the end, they value the silver they have. You know, people don't always pay attention to the image, which was essential and for which the king probably paid a lot.
Of course. And how did it got to the Hermitage Museum?
I think it was found in Kurgans in the 19th century on the, you know, the Tsarist territory. So somehow either it was already there and transmitted, or yeah, we cannot know. This is pure speculation. We don't have any text to know. But yeah, these kind of things are found. They can be taken out of Anatolia by raids. They can be sold. They can, yeah. Anything can be possible. We cannot follow the trace of the plates. This is even we have another famous from this period, the Kubrat treasury in Ukraine of the Bulgarian Khan. And even if we have inscriptions with Kubrat, we cannot be sure that the tomb in which they were found, so many vessels, Byzantine and also Sasanians, given as a gift probably of the Byzantines who took them from the Sasanians, but in any case, the name of Kubrat stays on them, and still we do not know if it is Kubrat tomb, you know. It can be someone else who simply raped the tomb and took all over the treasure. So it's difficult with this secondary history. What we can say about this plate, it is that it is an imperial workshop, as much as the stamp indicates it. And then we don't have literary text about this kind of plate in Byzantine times. We know that the plate served as political communication clearly in the Sasanian Empire. The Sasanian great kings represent themselves as usually as hunters. You know, we have all kinds of hunts on the Sasanian plates, and I'm thinking about this image of the hunter due to the relationship of Meleager with the Arsacids, you know, this Iranian connection behind, which could be used here in a positive way, you know.